And today the theme is rest for the weary. And Jesus says, "Come to me, all you that are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest." So just take a moment and think to yourself, are you weary? Anyone out there weary, worn down, kind of want to get off the merry-go-round for a while? A little more time to take some deep breaths. In fact, I was thinking about this theme on this first long weekend of summer. And, attendance is usually down on the May 2-4 weekend. And I'm kind of a little resentful of all those people who aren't here because they don't need to hear this sermon, right? They're out there resting. But here we are, obviously the ones who need to learn because we're not at the cottage. "Come to me, all you that are weary, and I will give you rest." And I dare say I chose this theme because I knew I'd need it by now as much as anyone else, because I'm busy. And so let's think about the busyness of life and how that wears you down. I'll start with me, and we'll be honest, that some of these things I've actually recently abdicated my responsibility for, so they're probably not making me weary, but the guilt of not doing them is. But there's the incessant meal planning, and then you got to buy the groceries, then you got to prepare the meals, and then you have to clean up after the meals. I didn't actually abdicate that one. I never do that, the cleaning up part. But still, I know it makes people tired. If you're raising kids, it's the juggling act. If you're a senior, a lot of the time it's like one more doctor's appointment. Right? Just the constant of it all, how things take longer. Life is wearying. And I think of students, trying to juggle going to school and studying and then having to work because it's so expensive to do that. So, we've got cross-generational exhaustion going on. But I think there's actually a weariness that's kind of different from all that everyday stuff that is actually more problematic, more detrimental to our spiritual well-being than the incessant to-do lists of our lives. And I kind of call it spiritual weariness. And it's more insidious, it's less obvious, but actually probably more harmful to our souls. So I'm thinking of the weariness that comes, from the guilt of the would have, could have, should have, if only. I'm thinking of the shame that comes from those experiences of, why did I let that happen? Why didn't I do something differently? The shame that comes from, if they only knew about me. The shame that comes from, do you know that one, that feeling of you're carrying the wound around and then someone just can tear the scab off with a whisper? And you're saying to yourself, it's been 20 years, why can't I move beyond that sense of shame and hurt? And your hands up? Surely I'm not alone. So this is the kind of weariness that I'm thinking of, the toll that those sorts of experiences in life have. Maybe it's the bitterness that comes, that you want to shake it. You know that you have this habit of always responding the same way to the same trigger, and gosh darn it, there you go, doing it again. That's the soul-killing stuff that I can speak of because I know it as well as any of you. And that's what I want to talk about when I talk about weariness today, is the shame and the guilt and the would have and could have and if they only knew. Is that the stuff that wears you down too? We are weary people. But it's the daily grind doesn't make us weary, it makes us tired. Maybe even a little grumpy. But the gut-wrenching, soul-consuming guilt and shame and measuring up, that's what makes us weary in our heart and our soul and frankly in our bodies as well. when I think about my time here with you and the stories that stick and the moments that have been most powerful to me, most of you don't come complaining about the pile of dishes that's always by the sink. Most of you want time with me and guidance and someone to walk alongside because of this other sort of stuff. It's the commonality that we share on this spiritual journey as community. And so I'm going to go to the scriptures as I do to look at what does it say to us about being weary and what to do about it. And it's funny that Mary should mention the creation story, because the creation story of God creating in 7 days. What happens on the seventh day? God rests. I don't think that it was that God was out of creative ideas or the couch was calling. I think God rested because God was weary, and God was even anticipating the kind of weariness that was going to get us down. A little further in the scriptures, you've got Jacob. A lot of good stories about Jacob, but there's this one, he's just heading off on a little journey, and on the first night ends up in one of those little biblical places that he's been to before. And he lays down for a rest that night, puts his head on a rock pillow, and encounters this dream. He encounters God in this dream. And when he wakes up from the dream, this is what Jacob says. He says, "Surely God is in this place, and I didn't know it. How awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven." So he rested. God showed up. And what did he realize? That the place he was the place where the holiness already was. It's kind of like Moses and the burning bush, the bush that doesn't burn. Take off your shoes, you're on holy ground. The ground was always holy. The bush might have always been burning, but Moses never took the time to look. When we stop from the weariness, when we step out of it or step aside, those are the moments when the world comes alive with God's presence, and we have this sort of aha moment, like, oh, it was holy all along. Missed it again. But what happens there is when people come away in the Bible from those stories, they don't go away with, oh, I'm such a horrible human because I missed it. They walk away saying, isn't this awesome? Isn't it awesome that I noticed the beauty and sacredness and life of this place? That it's never, ever too late. And so, who else did I want to share from the Bible with you? Well, let's go back to Jesus, because he's the one who said this in Matthew. "Come to me, you who are weary, and I'll give you rest." Here's the thing. Sometimes we've heard in church that you come to Jesus and it's about following the right rules and doing the right things and judgment and all of that. But all that he says here is just come and I'll give you rest. Just come. And I'll give you rest, and the rest will, what? That will reveal the presence of the holy that's already in your midst and already holding you. So, in a sense, when we come to Jesus, however you understand him, whether you are a Jesus is my boyfriend kind of person, because that is a beautiful part of the evangelical tradition that some of you bring here, or whether Jesus for you is a mystic teacher or that presence that accompanies you all the time, come to Jesus and I'll give you rest. It's not about offloading your list of worries to God or uploading them to some sort of cloud, Jesus. But it is about tangibly, in an incarnate, in a body sort of way, experiencing a release. Right? So I think sometimes we fool ourselves into thinking that a spiritual life, if we can unburden ourselves from the shame and the guilt and all that wears us down, that somehow it's smooth sailing from there. But the reality is that the weariness is a constant companion. Like, you may as well get to know it like you do a lover, because it will be there forever. The weariness is a companion. The shame and the guilt, it's part of what us humans do, but it's like opening yourself to the presence of the Holy One, the incarnate presence of that Christ light that's always here. And the more you can go to that place, the more in place the shame and the guilt land, and the less they take over all of the physical capacity of your heart and your soul. Come to me, all you who are weary, and I will give you rest. But let me also remind us that never, ever shame your weariness. Honor it. Listen to it. Pay attention to it. It's your sign, right? It's your sign that it's time to do something. Because here's the thing. When you're at your rope's end, when your soul just kind of feels dead, that's the moment when the stuff under the earth happens, right? That's all the stuff that happens in the muck and the soil. That's all that happens through the winter and the fall and the seasons when our faith tells us, and a little bit of science, that there is a lot happening below the surface. So when you pay attention to your weariness, when you stop for it, also just wait a bit and know that in that pause, so much is happening to bring about new life and growth in your very presence. It's not so much a directive to come to Jesus as it is more of a promise. And so my invitation to us is be a community that dares to name what makes your soul weary. Dare to say, here's the thing I've been hiding, and here's the thing I can't get over, and why do I always do that? And what you're going to find are companions along the way who are able to incarnate the grace and acceptance of the Holy One and teach you how to lean into that a little bit more too. Come to me, all you that are weary. But remember too, the Zen teaching. Before enlightenment, you know what? Before enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. So this spiritual path is a physical path. The holiness that is a gift to us shows up in the physical activities of life. And trust me, and trust yourselves, that there is rest for the weary. Pay attention to what your soul is saying, and the most beautiful things will be born. Amen.